Coming to you live from the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences. It's the Movie Change Up Podcast Mount Rushmore edition. Now, if you haven't seen Mount Rushmore before, essentially what it is we break down different topics within the realm of movies and give our Mount Rushmore. If you've watched any kind of sports podcast, they do this a lot with various things. Like you could have your Mount Rushmore of pitchers, or your Mount Rushmore of football players, or whatever it is. So we kind of wanted to bring that to movies and talk about that with various categories. With the Oscars coming up at the end of the month, we are talking about the Mount Rushmore of the Oscars. We'll be breaking down different categories like Mount Rushmore of Best Picture winners, Mount Rushmore of Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Director, Best Performance, the best moments of the Oscar, and the overall lifetime achievement, kind of a body of work type category when it comes to the Oscars. Now, normally there's 4 of us on here. Today we only had time for 2 of us, but we do have our friend Johnny's Picks, who is normally on this podcast. And Tristan is wearing his Johnny Sucks t-shirt, and I am not. So, Tristan, would you like to kick off our first category of Best Picture? Yeah. Nah, we'll just go in order: Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Director, Best Performances, Best Moments, and kind of end with Lifetime Achievements, kind of a whole body of work. Because I figure Lifetime Achievement, we'll talk about some of these people throughout, so kind of give people a little introduction to who these people are.
When it came out, and I picked that as my epic representation here, Gone with the Wind from 1939. My next pick, I wanted to pick the musical, because musicals were a huge genre for like an Oscar staple, and they always constantly seem to be trying and failing to make a comeback. Even this year we saw so many musicals come out, and how many of them actually ended up resulting in Oscar wins? I don't know if any of them will, and it'll be interesting to see the wins when we get to that. But my musical pick was The Sound of Music from 1965 that won at the 38th Academy Awards. I picked this because it was the highest grossing movie of all time when it came out. So I like that it's not just a Academy-pleasing movie, it pleased the audiences too. And I think a lot of its songs and its scenes and its characters still today are pretty relevant. Like every Christmas you hear a few of my favorite things on the radio, and a handful of the songs like Doe a Deer and 16 going on 17, a lot of those are still part of the pop culture that you see reference to and covered and things like that. And a lot of movies will parody Sound of Music even now, so I think that shows a level of cultural relevance that I like when I pick my Mount Rushmore. My next up is a modern classic, and my modern classic is Silence of the Lambs from 1991. It won at the 64th Academy Awards. I wanted to honor, the kind of genre offshoot that once in a while can break its way into the Best Picture list. And this was a horror thriller that managed to win a few Oscars. And I think horror is, even more so than fantasy and sci-fi, very blacklisted by the Academy. It never gets nominations when it deserves it. Horror has great makeup all the time, great effects, and never ever gets recognized for that. And you can say comic book movies and horror and fantasy and sci-fi and that kind of stuff don't get it either, but they get technicals all the time. Dune has a whole list of technical awards behind it, and also a Best Picture nominee. So I feel like it's even more of a victory to get a horror thriller in there, because that genre is just not at all respected by the Academy. And lastly, I thought nothing really summarizes the Oscars much like a huge, terrible Best Picture win that should not have gotten the win. And my fourth spot here is going to be Crash from 2004. It won the 77th Academy Awards. And like I said, nothing says Oscars like a terrible Best Picture winner that you can now go buy at the dollar store. And I think Crash is kind of the definitive Oscar fuck-up. Everyone talks about it as like the worst movie that won Best Picture, and how did that win? Why did it win? So I went with that as my fourth pick. I wanted to represent a failure in the Oscars choices here, because once in a while you get something where you're just like, why? How? You scroll through the list, you're like Green Book, Driving Miss Daisy, how do those get in there? And I think Crash is the definitive one, at least of the modern day discussion.
All right, I will start off with Johnny's list. So Johnny, the first one on his list, he had The Godfather. He says, if you ask non-film fans to name a movie that won Best Picture, chances are they at least know The Godfather. His second pick, The Lord of the Rings: Return of the King. It showed a franchise fantasy film can win Best Picture, only time the third of a trilogy has won, and largest sweep ever, having swept all 11 categories it was nominated for. He also wanted to go for the big epic with Lawrence of Arabia. It's the 1962 first year of Academy Award for Best Picture. He said Sam Spiegel won his third production, tied for all time with because of Bridge on the River Kwai and On the Waterfront. And finally, he chose Parasite, only South Korean film to win, only foreign language film to win, and he said it's the best picture of the 2010s. So I understand all those picks. For me, I think I like that we all kind of went in different realms. We didn't all just pick, here's the 4 best movies to win Best Picture. We all had our different things we wanted to represent and went with that. And so for me, I also had Parasite for a lot of the same reasons Johnny did. First foreign film to win Best Picture. I also chose Lord of the Rings: Return of the King for a lot of the same reasons. It's this big sci-fi, not sci-fi, but big fantasy epic, showed that a franchise movie could win Best Picture. I also chose Rocky from 1976. I feel it's almost like kind of one of the first, especially hearing the stories of how they made it, almost feels like one of the first independent movies to win. I don't know if technically it was an MGM movie, but it was like this small guerrilla-style filmmaking movie, and also the gauntlet that it had to go through to win. It was up against All the President's Men, Network, and Taxi Driver, a year where any of those 4 could have won, and it would have been a valid win. No one would have called it an upset or the wrong movie won. I think legitimately all 4 of those could have won. And then finally, I kind of did a similar thing than you, and I thought you were going to go with the same pick I did, and my final pick was in the realm of like, how did that movie win? I think it's the all-time upset, all-time wrong movie one, and that's How Green Was My Valley from 1941, beating both Citizen Kane and The Maltese Falcon, a movie no one remembers except for the fact that it was the movie that beat both Citizen Kane and The Maltese Falcon for Best Picture.
Yeah, I like that we both had the mindset of a huge whiff. That's where our minds went. I like your choice because I definitely think I like that you brought in what it beat too, because that's unbelievable. 2 of the best movies of that like whole era of film, and it went to this random movie that I'd never heard of.
Yeah, it's a movie that anyone only ever talks about as that's the movie that beat Citizen Kane, and also no one ever says it beat The Maltese Falcon. But I think if The Maltese Falcon is at least a movie that's remembered and people talk about, where I think if the Maltese Falcon had won Best Picture that year, it's not that big of like a whiff or an upset. It's like, maybe the lesser movie won, but it's still a valid movie and a movie worthy of a Best Picture win if Citizen Kane hadn't come out that year.
So what do you think we're going with, Joe? I would like to get one of our 2 whiffs in there. I think yours
I think
definitive.
Partially especially because Parasite and Lord of the Rings: Return of the King are locks because they're on Johnny and I both of our lists. I think it'd be nice to have an older movie on there, and I think kind of like the OG whiff of How Green Was My Valley deserves to be on the list, just to have something different and not another. I mean, basically have 3 movies from the 2000s, or was Crash like a 98, 99 movie?
Crash was 2004.
Exactly. Like, I don't want 3 movies from the 2000s or from the 21st century on our list.
I think that's a good call.
So I'd rather go with How Green Was My Valley. So that brings us to our 4th pick, and then we can either go with. I think we have to go with either Lawrence of Arabia or what was your big epic?
I went with Gone with the Wind for my big epic.
All right. I mean, it wasn't on my list. It was on Johnny's list, and he'd fight for it too because it was on his list. I think just the fact of an, basically having a 1939 movie, a 1941 movie, and then having, if we were to go with Gone with the Wind, a 1939, 1941, and then having a 2003 movie and a 2019 movie, I'd rather have something in the middle there to bridge that gap with Lawrence of Arabia in 1962.
That's a good point. I think that's a good call. A reason I picked Gone with the Wind is that I think it really set the standard for these kind of movies. When we're talking about Rushmore, I think I like to go back to sometimes what set the standard, and I think Gone with the Wind definitely is a huge epic, and I think I also think it's important too because the Academy loves to nominate like problematic movies, and I think Gone with the Wind is still talked about today for some controversial reasons, and I think that is part of the conversation too, and the fact that it went to debate, it went to always discuss. I don't hear people really talking about did Lawrence of Arabia deserve it or not deserve it, and is it worth remembering, is it not worth remembering, and I think Gone with the Wind is more of a conversation piece than Lawrence of Arabia was.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate going with Gone with the Wind. We can go with that. Neither one were on my list, but I'm not out here going to try to fight for Rocky very hard. It was just, I was looking at basically the main reason Rocky made it is I just like the idea of going through that gauntlet. That doesn't really represent anything as far as like a normal Oscar Best Picture race goes.
I definitely like the Rocky choice.
But also Johnny had The Godfather just as an option to throw that out to.
That's also a lot of good options here. I'm personally bouncing between Gone with the Wind and The Godfather in my mind because I think both of those are pretty definitive movies, and especially like Godfather had its anniversary this year, and it was literally selling out theaters still. Like I think that's pretty impressive.
And as far as like, I think the Best Picture race should be like the movie. I mean, not that they don't show Gone with the Wind, but like the movie that they show in, like what's the movie that they're gonna show in film school 30 years from now, and I feel like The Godfather is one of those movies that just influenced everything after it. Like originally when we were kind of how we were picking things was going to be based a little bit different. For Best Director, I had Mike Nichols, who did The Graduate, because it's like you can almost look at that as a point in film where the movies that won Best Picture before The Graduate and the movies that won Best Picture after The Graduate were two very completely different types of movies, and I feel like the movies that came out and the movies people were excited to see after The Godfather were different than the ones that came before. Like they completely changed the gangster genre.
Yeah, and I think if you ask someone to name a movie, like any movie, I feel like the most answer is going to be Godfather. Because that's like not just a definitive Oscar movie, not just a definitive mob movie, but like a definitive movie for the entire medium. So I think that's a really good pick.
All right. So ultimately, our winner, or our overall Mount Rushmore, if that's what we're locking in, we have The Godfather, we have How Green Was My Valley, we have Parasite, and we have The Lord of the Rings: Return of the King, which I feel like is a very diverse set of movies and a list of movies you would never see anywhere else but on the Movie Change Up Mount Rushmore pick for Best Picture.
That's true. It's a very us collection of movies there.
Yeah.
I'm not complaining about that list. Parasite, one of the best movies of all time. Lord of the Rings: Return of the King, one of the best movies of all time. Both of those are on the edge of my list, and I decided to give it for the interest of the conversation. I put in a couple of more other diverse choices, but I can't argue against Parasite or Lord of the Rings. Those are easy picks.
Yeah, Johnny had some other movies that he had in consideration. He had Casablanca, he had Titanic, saying it's the biggest box office hit to ever win, and he had Silence of the Lambs, like you said, only horror movie to ever win. So, all right, and that brings us to our Best Actor category, and I'll kick that off with Johnny's picks. His list includes Jack Nicholson, who had 8 nominations and 2 wins, Daniel Day-Lewis, who had 6 nominations and 3 wins, Spencer Tracy with 9 nominations and 2 wins, first actor to ever win in consecutive years, Tom Hanks being the only other, and then Sidney Poitier, first black actor to win. So Tristan, will go to your picks next.
Well, I'll say I have a couple crossovers here, a few of them actually. I have Daniel Day-Lewis, I think he is a definitive Oscar winner, and I think he represents kind of like the method acting type of Oscar bait, where he's going to get so into character, and he's going to be really, really like invested in his performance, and it actually pays off for him. And a lot of the method acting, it's like really embarrassing and kind of cringy.
Yeah.
And Daniel Day-Lewis manages to really actually pull it off and deliver some of the best performances of all time through it. So I think that's a really good pick. Another crossover I have is Sidney Poitier. I think it's notable that he was the first black man to win, and I want to say he was the only uh, black man to win that award until Denzel Washington did a really long time later.
Yeah.
So there's still a pretty big gulf to fill in some of these categories, and that's a pretty prime example of it. My next pick was Marlon Brando. He's a classic all-time actor. We talked about The Godfather a second ago, but he's been in so many classic movies. He was nominated 7 times. He won twice. And I think Marlon Brando, a bunch of the all-time best movies star Marlon Brando, and he is such a versatile actor. So I think I gave him the point here as just like a staple, old Hollywood kind of actor. So I really like him in there. And my last pick here is Leonardo DiCaprio. Technically, he only won once, sure, but I think he's a definitive actor for the modern Oscars. Like, he gets nominated practically every time he's in a movie, and he had like this huge social following of like, he's got to win this year, he's got to win this year, he's never going to win this year. And I think people watch the Oscars for Leonardo DiCaprio specifically, and I think that's something to note. Like, the fact that people were rooting for him for so many years. When he finally won, that felt like a release, and it wasn't his best performance that he won for, but it was a good performance, and I think it was sort of an honorary win where it was like, look, man, you put in the work. You've done a lot of these. You gotta get this win here. So I gave it to Leonardo DiCaprio. I wanted to represent someone who only has won once, sure, but I think has like a big following behind him for that one win, and everyone was kind of waiting for him to get that win. So I feel like he had the social following of the Oscars. So I gave a pick here to Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah, I definitely understand that point. So my list, I have Leonardo DiCaprio for a lot of the same reasons. Most anticipated, I think if Chadwick Boseman had won last year, I think he would have replaced Leonardo DiCaprio because there was a lot of big like hype and excitement, especially it being a posthumous award. But yeah, I don't know if there's ever been a most like as far as like the fan perspective and the viewer perspective, a more anticipated win and one people were rooting for more than Leonardo DiCaprio that year, and so that's why it was on my list for that, as far as like one that people were rooting for and wanting. I also have Daniel Day-Lewis. He has 3 wins right now. I don't think anyone will ever eclipse that, number one, because I think there's a chance he could win 4. Not this year because he's not nominated, but he says he's retired, but he retires like every 3 years, and then he comes out with another performance and gets nominated and wins. There's only like 2 people I think that even have a chance of winning 3 right now, and that's Tom Hanks and Sean Penn. Everyone else with 2 is either dead or long retired, so I don't think there's a chance someone could eventually tie him, but I don't think anyone's ever going to eclipse him anytime soon. I also chose Marlon Brando. He has 2 wins with 2 of the greatest performances of all time as Terry Malloy in On the Waterfront and as Vito Corleone in The Godfather. I think you give arguably 2 performances that people could say that's the best actor performance of all time. I think he deserved to be on the list. He also changed acting with his style of method acting. Daniel Day-Lewis kind of perfected it and went on to be the greatest actor of all time, but Marlon Brando's the origin of it. And then I chose Spencer Tracy as well as Johnny did because of the 9 nominations and 2 back-to-back wins. And so I think we all had Daniel Day-Lewis. So
yeah, Daniel Day-Lewis we all had. Me and you both had Leonardo DiCaprio. Me and you both had Marlon Brando.
And me and Johnny both had Spencer Tracy, but you and Johnny also both had Sidney Poitier. I think Sidney Poitier, he was like, if I could have a 5th slot, he would have been my 5th slot. So if we want to lock Daniel Day-Lewis and Sidney Poitier in, I'm okay with that. And then it's just deciphering who the other 2 slots go to. Do we throw in Marlon Brando? Because like him, I mean, it's hard. This is where it's hard because Spencer Tracy has the most nominations with 9. But part of why we're including Daniel Day-Lewis is he has the most wins, and like if we're just putting someone on there for having the most, I feel like the most wins is more important than the most nominations. And so if we're putting someone on there for having the most, Daniel Day-Lewis kind of already has that slot. So I'd kind of want to include Leonardo DiCaprio, like you and I have, for the most anticipated.
Yeah, I like Leonardo DiCaprio because it doesn't go by the same logic as the other ones. You know, it's sort of he only won the one time, but he had the following behind him, and I think that's interesting as a differentiator between a lot of these other choices.
Yeah.
So right now, what do we got?
So I think we have Daniel Day-Lewis and Leonardo DiCaprio and Sidney Poitier locked. And I think it's essentially comes down to, am I wrong? It comes down to between Spencer Tracy and Marlon Brando, of who gets the fourth slot.
It's tough. I think Spencer Tracy definitely has like that classic Hollywood appeal that Marlon Brando also has. You know,
Yeah.
he's an old timer actor. You know, uh, it's a tough call. The reason that I went with Marlon Brando is that I just think he's still managed to stay relevant to the modern conversation in a way that some of the classic actors have not. You know, and I
Yeah.
think that shows a quality to the work that he's done. You know, the people still watch his movies today and still talk about them today. So that was what kind of pushed him over the edge for me. But like, it's hard to argue against. Like Spencer Tracy has so many movies he was in, you know, and with a lot of classic all-time actresses too, like Ingrid Bergman and that kind of stuff. I think that's it also. Betty Davis, like I think he represents that classic era really well. So I would not be sad to see him get in there.
This is hard because it's basically there's no tiebreaker. It all just comes down to the argument. And I feel, while it's a crime to leave Spencer Tracy off, I feel like it's a bigger crime to leave Marlon Brando off of the Mount Rushmore of Best Actor.
I think that Marlon Brando is an all-timer. You know,
Mm.
you have so many good options there to go with. So I would not be sad about that. I mean, he's on my list. I made an argument. I think Spencer Tracy has that old school. You know, work with Humphrey Bogart, work with Elizabeth Taylor, a lot of the all-timers. So I think that's a good pick. But Marlon Brando, yeah. I mean, how do you leave him off?
All right.
Some of the best movies of all time.
So I think that locks it in. Our Best Actor Mount Rushmore is Marlon Brando, Sidney Poitier, Daniel Day-Lewis, and Leonardo DiCaprio, which I think is a very good, solid list and one you could look at and be like, yeah, that's the Mount Rushmore of Best Actor.
Yeah, I think it fits.
Yeah.
All of them deserve a spot.
And Johnny had some other movies or other actors he had for his in consideration. Laurence Olivier tied with Tracy with 9 noms, but only has 1 win. Anthony Hopkins, 4 noms, 2 wins, oldest to ever win and won 29 years apart. Denzel Washington, 7 noms, 1 win, most nominations by a black actor. And then finally Marlon Brando, 7 nominations and 2 wins. Which brings...
he had Marlon Brando on there, so I don't feel as bad now.
Yeah. Yeah, for his in consideration, which brings us to Best Actress, and I will kick that off with my own picks. My first choice, I had Katharine Hepburn, 4 wins, 12 nominations. Meryl Streep with 2 wins, 17 nominations. I had Louise Fletcher for I think was one of the best performances to win Best Actress with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And then I also had Frances McDormand, who has 3 wins, and I feel like with 2 wins within the last 5 years, she's kind of the current face of the category. So I wanted to include her as well. And then I will go to Tristan. What are your picks for Best Actress?
So my picks here for Best Actress, I have, of course, Meryl Streep. I think it's hard to not put Meryl Streep. She's a staple of getting nominated. I also have Halle Berry. I think she was, of course, the first black woman to win and the only black woman to win this award. So I think that deserves a spot for sure. And she had a really powerful speech, and I think it's one of the best speeches we've gotten at the Oscars. So I think that is on my list for sure. Next, I have Audrey Hepburn. She was a staple of her era. She got nominated. I had a list of. She got nominated, I think, 8 times. She got nominated 5 times, and she won once. But I liked her because she's an EGOT winner. She's won a Emmy, a Grammy, a Tony and an Academy Award, so she's gone all over the place. And I think she has some of the great movies here, like Roman Holiday, Breakfast at Tiffany's, Wait Until Dark, Nun Story, and Sabrina are all of her Oscar-nominated movies, but she's had all kinds of movies, and she was kind of a staple. And she was up against a lot of actresses all the time, but she was always nominated and just beloved by people at that time. And I think she has that kind of doe-eyed, young, ingenue type of look that I wanted to represent on my list here. And for me, I picked a modern. You went with Frances McDormand as your modern day kind of staple to win, and I went with Olivia Colman. I think she's a really. She always comes in and does upsets. You know, she's been the upset queen the last couple of years, and she gave a great speech as well when she won for The Favorite, and a very unexpected win, but I think a very deserving win. And I'll always remember her really genuine, emotional reaction to that win, and it feels like she's very, very quickly become a staple of the Academy, where every time she's in a movie, you think, oh, yes, a potential Oscar nominee right there. You know, even Lost Daughter, which was not an overwhelmingly great movie, people were like, oh, she's going to get a nomination for that for sure. You know, so I think that is really a cool thing for her. And that was my representation for like a modern day woman who seems to always be winning.
All right, and that brings us to Johnny's picks. He had Katharine Hepburn with 12 nominations and 4 wins. Meryl Streep, again, 17 nominations, 2 wins. Halle Berry, like you said, only person of color to have ever won the award. And he had Marlee Matlin, only deaf actor to win and youngest actress to have won at age 21. And so I'm trying to think. I feel like Katharine Hepburn. Did you have Katharine Hepburn as well, or no?
I did not have her, but that's an easy one to put in there.
All right, so I think Katharine Hepburn and Meryl Streep are locks. You both had Halle Berry, so I think that makes her a lock. And then, so that's 3, and then we kind of got to figure out the other. I will say, Johnny did have Frances McDormand in his consideration if we wanted to, because I feel like we need like that modern actress. Not that Meryl Streep isn't modern, but she hasn't been winning them as recently as Frances McDormand has, and she's more considered. So if that's the route we wanted to go with, a more modern actress, I feel like that would be our tiebreaker instead of you and me debating back and forth about who it is.
Yeah, I think I was gonna even cave to you because Frances McDormand was a really good pick, so I think that's a one that I definitely would swap out for.
All right.
Olivia Colman on the official Mount Rushmore.
All right, so I think that's pretty easy, cut and dry. Our Mount Rushmore of Best Actress winners, we have Katharine Hepburn, Meryl Streep, Halle Berry, and Frances McDormand. Which again, solid list. You know, if the Oscars came out and said this is our Mount Rushmore of Best Actress winners, you'd look at that and be like, I mean, I can't debate it. So.
Nomadland, great movie. I really liked it.
That was fun. Which brings us to our next category of Best Director. And Tristan, I will let you start off with your picks.
All right, so for my Best Director, I went with, first up, Billy Wilder. I think he is a pioneer of genres. He was a critical staple for most of his run. I like that he defied genre in a way that a lot of directors seem like they can't. You know, a lot of them kind of get stuck in, this is the kind of movie I make, and they'll kind of break the barriers a little bit, kind of get out of their comfort zone a little bit. But Billy Wilder was able to go from like a slapstick rom-com and Some Like It Hot to a like gritty noir that like set the standard for all of noir going forward in a Double Indemnity. So I like the wide variety of that director, and I think he represents that classic era really, really well. My next pick is Steven Spielberg. If you ask anyone to name a director, they're going to say Steven Spielberg, and I think he's a definitive film director that everybody knows the name of, and he's the only director since 1939 to be nominated twice at the same ceremony for 2 different movies, and I think only Spielberg could do that. You know, the man outputs so much, and he's not like necessarily on a hot streak, but West Side Story put him back in the hot streak, and even Bridge of Spies, like he can get nominated for stuff that is not like incredible movies, but he's always a nomination because he's Steven Spielberg and he's kind of changed the entire industry. So I gave him a pick here. My next pick was Kathryn Bigelow. She's the first woman to win, and I love her kind of energized, kinetic direction. She also is versatile. She did Zero Dark 30. She also did Point Break. You know, she can really traverse the action genre, and I thought Hurt Locker was a really great one. She was able to get a lot of tension out of that movie, and I think she really, really is just a great director for tension, and that's something that I think, like a thriller with action elements, is not something you necessarily think of when you think of Oscar nominees, but I'm glad that she gets to put her stamp in there and have some impact. And my next pick is John Ford. He got 5 nominations. He won 4 of them. That's a pretty good ratio there. And I wanted to cover a variety of genres here, so I went for the guy who is known for his westerns. You have stuff like Stagecoach and all-time classic westerns. So I wanted to throw a little bit of love to every genre in here. So my pick here was John Ford.
All right. Solid list of picks. I will read my picks next. And so my director, I also had Kathryn Bigelow as well for The Hurt Locker, first woman to win. I thought especially as the industry's changing, it's a solid pick, something you want to have represented. I chose Bong Joon-ho, foreign representation. There's been a few here and there, like Alexandru and Ritu, but it's kind of the first foreign director to direct a foreign language film to win Best Picture, so I thought he was the best person to represent that category. I also chose John Ford as well, 4-time winner, 5-time nominee, most wins for Best Director. Then I also went with a little bit different choice for Best Director, something I didn't think anyone else would have on their list, but something I thought needed a warranted representation, and that is Robert Redford to represent kind of the actor turned director, because you had Richard Attenborough, Warren Beatty, Kevin Costner, Clint Eastwood twice, Mel Gibson, and Ron Howard all won after him, so I thought he kind of kickstarted something that's kind of took over Hollywood for the next 20, 30 years after his win as director for Ordinary People. And
that's a good pick.
And then also to read Johnny's picks, he had John Ford as well, 5 nominations, 4 wins. Steven Spielberg for his 8 nominations and 2 wins. Kathryn Bigelow, first woman to win the award in 2009. And then Ang Lee, first Asian director to win, only Asian director to win twice for Brokeback Mountain and Life of Pi. So I think we can kind of lock in John Ford and Kathryn Bigelow. I know.
Yeah, they were on all of our lists.
Yeah, so they were on all lists, and then it comes down to was trying to think who was on 2 lists. I believe you and Johnny both had Steven Spielberg, so I think he's kind of a lock at that point.
Andy Spielberg.
Yeah, so, and I feel like Spielberg would have been, if there was 5 people on Mount Rushmore, he would have been my 5th pick. And then, so that kind of brings us to a choice between essentially Ang Lee, Robert Redford, and who was the alternate on your list that we didn't
I had Billy Wilder.
Billy Wilder, yeah, so that's kind of our choice. Billy Wilder, Robert Redford, or Ang Lee. I feel it's tough because I think all 3 warrant selections. Are you kind of leaning any way? Are you stuck on wanting Billy Wilder on your list?
I'll say the reason that I like Billy Wilder is that we have classic Hollywood representation on there, and we don't necessarily have a lot of old Hollywood people on this list. Everyone we have on here, I believe, is we have John Ford, I guess.
Yeah, we do have John Ford.
So that represents that. Now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, Steven Spielberg, Kathryn Bigelow are both still working directors. Ang Lee also, I think, is a really good choice. I think the diversity angle of it, sure, but also he has some really good work.
Yeah,
I think
two
Brokeback Mountain, Life of Pi are both really, really good movies.
2 wins for 2 very different types of movies. I mean, if you didn't know, you wouldn't assume that Brokeback Mountain and Life of Pi were directed by the same guy.
And I love Ang Lee's direction. He's very distinct and he's very unique. I like his Hulk movie for what it is. I like a lot of his work.
The movie sucks. And I don't know. I wish I could just group all of the actor turned directors into one thing and be you represent that realm, because it's does Robert Redford himself deserve to be on the Mount Rushmore? Maybe, maybe not. But I just thought the actor turned director was something that warranted being represented on the Mount Rushmore.
That is a good point. I like that. It's a hard call. I'm going between Ang Lee and Robert Redford for this because I think they represent very different things. Yeah. And I'm looking at this, and we have Spielberg, who is a big epic kind of director. We have Kathryn Bigelow, who's the tense, small-scale thriller kind of director, right? We don't have anyone that makes movies like Ang Lee does, And I would think that would be my choice. I think Ang Lee is a very distinct voice, and I think I would like to see him on there. I think it's tough because that's not necessarily someone you think of when you think of Oscar directors, whereas Ron Howard, I think you definitely think of him. And Robert Redford, I mean, you think of him when you think of Oscar directors.
I think if Robert Redford had another win, or if he won for a movie that was more in pop culture, I think it'd be easier to fight for him. But it's hard to be like, outside of what he represents, it's hard to be like Robert Redford for his directing of Ordinary People deserves to be on the Mount Rushmore of Best Director winners. So with that, I will concede to Ang Lee winning.
Ordinary People is a great movie though. Watch it on HBO Max. Really good movie.
Yeah. So with that, our Mount Rushmore of Best Directors is Ang Lee, Steven Spielberg, Catherine Bigelow, and John Ford, which is a list, again, can't really debate it. Solid list.
A lot of good lists so far. This is a good episode. It was a tough one to put these together because there's so many good options. And yeah, read off those lists and it's like, yeah, I can't argue about that.
Yeah, Johnny's in consideration. He had Bong Joon-ho, William Wyler, and Martin Scorsese. So again, some other ones we could have thrown on there.
Scorsese is a good one. I really wanted to get him on there, but with only the one win, it was kind of hard to get him on there.
Yeah. All right, and that brings us to our next category of Best Oscar Moments. And I haven't really been following any kind of pattern. I've just been like, who hasn't started in a while? And I will kick this off with my own picks.
I will say there's one that I'd be surprised if you didn't have it on there, but I'll see if you do or don't.
Alright, wait. Oh, this is Johnny's picks. I'm like, I don't remember that being my pick. Let me go to my screen of my picks. Oh, wait, I skipped. Oh, did Johnny not send in his best? Oh, he did it backwards. Sorry, our next category is Best Performance. There we go.
Oh, I did it backwards too.
Maybe I did. Who knows?
Let's go with performance. What do we got?
Our next category of Best Oscar Performance. Johnny has, or whoever's list. This is Johnny's list. Sorry, I said I was kicking off of mine. I'm on Johnny's page. It's already taking
Joey's been drinking. It's only 8:30 in the middle.
So Johnny's picks for Best Individual Performance: Daniel Day-Lewis, There Will Be Blood. He calls it the greatest performance in the history of cinema. Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight. He says maybe the most memorable win of all time due to his death and the popularity of the film. He's got Lupita Nyong'o for 12 Years a Slave, best ever performance by an Oscar-winning actress. And he also has Louise Fletcher, One Floor Over the Cuckoo's Nest, one of the most famous character portrayals of all time, paved the way for future villainous wins, i.e. Kathy Bates in Misery and Charlize Theron in Monster. And I think Johnny kind of did the same route I did, and that is one from each of the acting categories. And so here are my picks for Best Individual Performance. Joe Pesci in Goodfellas, kind of representing the Best Supporting Actors. Lupita Nyong'o in 12 Years a Slave to represent the Best Supporting Actresses. Daniel Day-Lewis in There Will Be Blood for the Best Actors. And Louise Fletcher from One Floor Over the Cuckoo's Nest for Best Actress. So Johnny and I have three in common, so I think this list will probably be easy to assemble, but I'm curious to see what your list is as well.
Yeah, I have a feeling it's going to be an easy one to say here. I have Lupita Nyong'o as well. I think that's a really, really incredible performance. And her career is not really taken off after that. It's one of those actresses where like she won the Oscar and then that was like it.
Yeah.
For like the acclaim, you know. She's still doing good stuff. You know, she's fine. She's good in the Black Panther and that kind of stuff, but she's not, you know, an Oscar darling. My next is Heath Ledger from The Dark Knight. I think, obviously, for the post-death win, I think that's a definitive moment of the Oscars. But I also think he's like the definitive villain performance, and especially in a superhero movie. Like every single superhero movie that comes out, the villain is compared to Heath Ledger as the Joker. You know, and anytime anyone brings up like, oh, they don't nominate superhero movies enough, they don't do this or that, people are like, oh well, Heath Ledger won for the Joker, so what do you know? You know, and I think it's still talked about today, and it's for a good reason. You watch that movie, and I think he is the dramatic performance of a really, really great movie filled with good performances. So I went with him for that. Next up, I went with Matthew McConaughey at Dallas Buyers Club. I think that was the McConaissance. You know, people were rooting for him. and it was like the Leonardo DiCaprio level, but all condensed into like a single year or like 2 years. You know, he went from these rom-coms to all of a sudden doing really good stuff, and everyone was rooting for him. And then this performance came out, and it was almost universal. Like as soon as the movie came out and you watched it, you were like, he's gonna win. And
Yeah.
there wasn't even really a competition of anybody else that year. Like it was just his award to win, you know. So I think I wanted to represent that. Where as soon as the movie launches, you're like, oh, that's gonna be it, and there's never really any other competitor that comes around. And my last choice, one that might not make the list, but made my list, and that's Nicolas Cage in Leaving Las Vegas. Fuck you, Nicolas Cage won an Oscar. Anytime anybody says he's bad, you just gotta be like, you mean the Academy Award winning Nicolas Cage? You know, and I think this is a evidence to me that he could do anything he wants in Hollywood, essentially, but he's choosing to do these bizarre movies that he finds to be a lot more fun, a lot more challenging, and the versatility of Nicolas Cage is fully on display with this performance. You know, he's funny in this dark. He's like darkly funny. He's also just really kind of dark and brooding, and I think this captures a lot of Nicolas Cage's mannerisms in this performance, and it's a genuinely good performance. And also, I wanted to get Nick Cage on the list here. You know, I think it's just very fun that Nick Cage has an Oscar, and it's talked about all the time. You go in the comment section of like a Nick Cage montage, and the comments are just like, "Did you know Nick Cage won an Oscar? This man won an Oscar." And yeah, you know, I love you, Nick Cage, and I love you got an Oscar. You deserved it.
All right, I think that kind of wraps up our list for the most part. I think we went through everybody's, and I think this list is going to be pretty easy to assemble. Johnny and I both had Daniel Day-Lewis. We both had Louise Fletcher. All three of us had Lupita Nyong'o. You two had the Joker, Heath Ledger. I think that's 4, right?
I think that's 4, you know, and yeah, I touted it. Daniel Day-Lewis in There Will Be Blood, genuinely an all-time performance. So, how do you argue against that?
Yeah. So.
And I didn't think of this Ratchet, but I think that's a really good choice. I would have maybe tried to work that in there if I could.
All right. So yeah, best individual performance, Mount Rushmore. You have Heath Ledger as the Joker, Lupita Nyong'o from 12 Years a Slave, Daniel Day-Lewis in There Will Be Blood, and Louise Fletcher in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And now.
Fifth slot is Nick Cage, right? Right at number 5.
He's like this. There's a statue of all of the Nick Cage characters when you walk into the Mount Rushmore.
Okay, yeah. You don't get like a screaming Nick Cage face like on the side of Mount Rushmore, you know, just like carved in next to everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah, like how there's the statue of Crazy Horse like 2 miles away from Mount Rushmore. There's a statue of Nicolas Cage 2 miles away from the best.
Yeah, just shit-faced drunk.
Yeah. All right, and so that brings us to our Mount Rushmore of best Oscar moments, and I will now actually kick off this list, and I'm looking at mine and not Johnny's this time. In the first one, we have Moonlight wins Best Picture. I watched the clip again before we started filming. It's a great moment. They go on. Everyone's having a good time. The translator's just on overdrive trying to process everyone's conversation. They at one point shut the lights off on them, and everyone in the audience is just like, turn the lights back on. We want to hear everyone talk. And it was just like, I think it was kind of the first time in maybe like 6 or 7 years where like the Best Picture really won Best Picture, and you could feel it in the audience. Like everyone was just so happy for him and rooting for him, and it was just like a great moment, I feel. My next one is a personal favorite of mine. I don't expect it to be on you or Johnny's list, and that's 3 6 Mafia wins Best Original Song for Hustle and Flow with It's Hard Out Here for a Pimp. Just like, to me, this is what the Oscars should be about. It's like these guys, it's just pure happiness and joy. If you're ever having a bad day, just go up and look on YouTube. 3 6 Mafia winning best original song. Just these guys are having a great time. They're just thanking everybody in the audience. They're just excited for themselves, and that's what every Oscar speech should be. Wait, I completely read that. I read Moonlight wins Best Picture, and then I talked about Parasite's win. That's my bad. Because I have Parasite.
You liked Moonlight so much.
So go back to when I said Moonlight wins Best Picture. That's what I meant to say for Parasite wins Best Picture. Moonlight winning Best Picture, that whole fiasco. Everyone just like the whole fiasco of like it's La La Land and then it's Parasite, or it's La La Land and then it's Moonlight, that whole thing. But yeah, like I said, Parasite, everyone happy. First time movie had won, or like the first time the Best Picture had truly won in like 6 or 7 years, I feel. And another one that's kind of a personal favorite of mine, and that's Charlie Chaplin's 12-minute standing ovation at the 1972 Oscars. Everyone just happy and excited, welcoming him back. He'd kind of been kicked out of the United States, kind of during the whole Red Scare thing, and it was just, it's almost to me like a what could have been. Like if that didn't go down, like what kind of movies and what kind of work could we have gotten from him in that time? But I think it's like one of the longest standing ovations of all time. So yeah, those are my 4 picks, and I will go to Johnny's picks. And he has, for Oscar moments, the La La Land Moonlight fiasco, like I had. Marlon Brando sending up the Native American woman in protest. I believe that was for his win in The Godfather. And it's very interesting to see how Oscar acceptance speeches have changed, because she went on to speak about like the plight of her people and the problems within the Native American community, and they're all just like booing the shit out of her, like trying to get her off the stage. Or I feel like if that happened today, it would be like a standing ovation, and people would be like praising Marlon Brando for like giving someone like her a platform.
Mm-hmm.
And then he also has Parasite winning Best Picture, the entire crew going on stage, like I had as well. And then finally he has Halle Berry winning Best Actress and kind of giving one of the all-time Oscar acceptance speeches. So Tristan, what are your 4 picks for best moments at the Oscars?
Yeah, I have one that is on all your lists, and it's La La Land winning Best Picture for about 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And then saying, oh, wait, no, it was Moonlight. I think that was one of the funniest things I've seen in a while. And I'll remember like every individual second of watching this, and like every person's reaction. And as you're like figuring out what happened, it's like the ultimate cringe compilation. You know, you go back and you see like Ryan Gosling's face as it's going on, and it's like the most uncomfortable thing. Mm-hmm. Hilarious. Yeah. And yeah, that'll go down in history for Oscar moments for me for sure. I have an infamously parodied awards acceptance speech from Sally Fields, quoted as, "You like me, you really, really like me," you know, and people quote that all the time, and I noted it because that's not even the quote, you know, that was a quote from the parody. Her speech was misquoted by pop culture. Her actual line was, "You like me, right now you like me." She doesn't say "you really, really like me," she says it differently, and I think that's an interesting little pop culture tidbit, but I think that's a very famous speech, and I wanted to get that on there because it's talked about all the time. It's made fun of all the time, and especially that one line that ultimately is not the line from the speech. And I had a moment similar to Marlon Brando's moment with Johnny, but for me, I had Michael Moore when he goes up and he wins, and he gives a speech criticizing George W. Bush, and the whole crowd boos him, and they cut his mic off and kick him off the stage, like, how dare you criticize George W. Bush? And it was a similar thing of like, wow, how have things changed, you know? He was booed off the stage for criticizing George W. Bush, and now it seems like every speech is trying to factor in some kind of political message. And it's like everybody wants to say something about something. And even if I agree with them or don't agree with them, it's a different conversation. But mostly I do agree with them. But I think it's very funny to watch that clip now, and he's getting booed off the stage for that. And my last pick here is when Spike Lee won for Best Adapted Screenplay for Black Klansman. It's kind of a personal favorite moment. He charges the stage. He's really hyped because, of course, he's been kind of shafted by the Oscars over and over again. He loses to like these pretty bad movies, and he charges the stage. He's really hyped. He jumps up over the stage and jumps up and hugs Samuel L. Jackson, like full body hugs him, and it's a very cool moment because they've worked together so long, and they're both these very, very groundbreaking black men in Hollywood. So I love that moment of him being so excited to win. And you can see how genuinely excited he is. You know, he's someone who really, I think, wanted to win an Oscar, you know, and he wanted to have that level of, like, confirmation from his peers in a way of, like, yeah, you did it, man. You really did. And I think he probably would have liked it to be for a director, but I like that he was so excited for screenplay as well. Like, he was just happy to win. Yeah. And I love that level of joy, and that's what I think the Oscars should bring, is just pure excitement and joy for the art and for, like, pushing the art forward. And I think Black Klansman is a great movie, and a movie that is challenging and not necessarily like the comfort movie that the Academy sometimes goes for. So I love that win, and I love his reaction to it.
All right, so I think we can lock in the La La Land Moonlight fiasco because it's on both of our lists. And then Johnny and I don't remember if you had it. We had the Parasite winning Best Picture, but that's on 2 lists, so I think we can lock that in.
That's an easy win.
And I feel like the Marlon Brando sending up the Native American woman and then your Michael Moore are kind of in a similar vein, and I feel like the Marlon Brando one is more like I feel like that kind of has to be represented to an extent, and I feel like the Marlon Brando one is more iconic and the one I would vote for to make the list.
Yeah, it's a good one. I think that's definitely a more iconic moment.
So then that brings us to voting between Halle Berry winning Best Actress, 3-6 Mafia winning, Chaplin's 12-minute standing ovation, and then what other differences did you have? You had the Sally Field.
I had Sally Field's speech, the one that is quoted all the time.
Yeah.
That was my logic for it. Is everyone says that you like me, you really, really like me, and I think that's a quote that is said all the time and attributed to her in that speech.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm trying to process my thoughts. I think the one that you and I were both trying to represent ultimately with both my Chaplin one, my 3-6 Mafia one, and the Sally Field one are all just like the pure, and also even your Spike Lee one is like the pure joy and excitement of just like winning the Academy Award, being represented, and I feel like the Sally Field one is the more iconic one. Obviously, like you said, the parody, the quote, everything. So I feel like, and like I thought about that one as well, but I put 3-6 Mafia just like for the more personal choice because I love watching that clip so much. But I feel like if we were to put a fourth one on there, it would be the Sally Field. You like me, not really like me.
I agree. I think that's a really famous Oscar misquote.
Yeah.
I think it also represents like the people criticize that speech a lot of like, oh, why is she being all about herself, and I feel like that's all the Oscar speeches.
Yeah. So I think that locks in our pick. We have La La Land wins Best Picture for 2 minutes. Parasite wins Best Picture. I believe her name was Little Feather, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But Marlon Brando sends up a Native American woman to accept his Oscar for him. And finally, and gets booed off the stage for it. And finally, Sally Field's acceptance speech.
I think that's a good list.
All right, and that brings us to the Lifetime Achievement category, the Oscar body of work, as you will. And we will start with Tristan's list.
All right, let's start with my list here. I for my first pick, I went with Gene Kelly. His only Oscar is like an honorary Lifetime Achievement Oscar, but I think that squeezes him in, and he's like a all-around performer. A director, a writer, a dancer, a singer, an actor. He had it all, man, and he really kind of kicked off the talkie era of movies and the kind of big musical era. So I think he has a huge career of really definitive and important movies, even though he didn't actually win a lot of Oscars for any of them. And he got nominated a few times and didn't actually win for it. So I wanted to get him in here in the Lifetime Achievement Award because he does have that one Oscar, but I think he deserved a lot more than just the one. My next choice is a cinematographer, Roger Deakins, arguably the best cinematographer working today, if not ever. Certainly one of the most well-known. He's only started to win kind of recently, but he's had a really long career of nominations. So he has a huge long list of great movies, not just nominated movies, but some of the best-looking movies of the 21st century are Roger Deakins movies. Even before that, he was making great movies back to the 80s. He's done some great stuff. So I wanted to throw some love to a cinematographer and give Roger Deakins a nomination here. My third pick here was Mary Pickford. She was famous for her work with Charlie Chaplin. She was a silent film actress, and she won the second ever lead actress Oscar at the second Academy Awards in 1930. She was called the Queen of Movies in her day. She was not only a silent film actress, she was like a very definitive, one of the foundational women of the film industry, arguably the most important woman in the history of film. She was the only female founder of the Academy of Motion Pictures, so I thought she deserved a slot in here because she literally founded the Oscars, and a very at the peak of her career, she had strong creative control over everything that she was in, and she started multiple studios, that have now grown into United Artists and Paramount, which are still around today, releasing stuff. I think that is a pretty great moment in history, and she also embodies that the opposite of Gene Kelly, where she never really was able to transition out of the silent era into the talkie era as an actress, and her career kind of started to collapse after the talkies became the norm for movies. So I wanted to represent that era of Hollywood that doesn't necessarily get a lot of representation, because obviously the Oscars, by the second time or the first, they were already into the talking era, so they weren't really around for the silent film era. She received an honorary Oscar in 1976, which was only her second Oscar after winning for lead actress, and I think her importance in Hollywood history is why I got her on here, and her importance specifically to the founding and the starting of the Oscars as the only woman on the founding members of the Academy. And my fourth pick here is an editor, Thelma Schumacher. She's Scorsese's go-to editor, and I think editing is a majorly important and overlooked element of filmmaking. You can tell from this year where the editing is not even being broadcast live on the Academy Awards. So I think if you thought Goodfellas and Raging Bull and The Departed were all really thrilling, thank Thelma Schumacher, because the editing is in the background making all of that actually work. She won 3 times. She got nominated a bunch of times. She's tied for the record for most editing wins, and I would not be surprised if she beat that record. She still has plenty ahead of her. She has Killers of the Flower Moon coming out. It would be nice if that was able to push her over to the 4th win. But I try to represent a variety of categories here, and I think throwing an editor in there, Thelma Schumacher is definitely one that I wanted to get on there.
All right. Is that all 4 of your picks?
That's all 4 of my picks.
All right. I will go to Johnny's picks and end on my own. So he has John Williams, famous composer, 52 nominations, 5 wins. He says Johnny says he's the most nominated person alive, which is not true. The person that is on my list, and I will talk about them. Meryl Streep, most nominated actor ever with 21 nominations across the Best Actress and Best Supporting Actress category. Edith Head, most awarded woman in Oscar history, having won 8 costume design Oscars between 1949 to 1973. And finally, he has Cedric Gibbons, who won 11 Oscars for Best Production Design and designed the Oscar statuette itself. So, good person to have.
That's an interesting poll.
Good person to have on your list. So I also have John Williams, 52 nominations and 5 wins. And
52 nominations, that's insane.
And I also have the most nominated person, that is Walt Disney, 59 nominations and 22 wins. And he started the company that now owns the company that broadcasts the Oscars. So I thought that was kind of an interesting, because, Walt Disney Corporation, and it's broadcast on ABC. So an interesting poll. I also have someone I never would have thought would have made my list until I did some research, and that's Kenneth Branagh, who is nominated in 7 categories, and he's been nominated in more categories than anyone else ever. This year with Belfast, the nominations put him over the top to make him the person nominated in most categories. He's been nominated in the categories of director, actor, supporting actor, live action short, adapted screenplay, original screenplay, and best picture. So, thought interesting person to have. And then I also wanted to have Katharine Hepburn, 4 wins, 12 nominations. So, be interesting to see. I think Johnny and I both having John Williams probably makes him a lock for the list.
Mm-hmm.
And then ultimately, I don't think there's a single commonality between us after John Williams.
I'll say that I think this is a good category to maybe get Meryl Streep in, because we didn't get her into the actress list, but she does have the long-running career of constantly getting nominated all the time.
Yeah, I'm fine with Meryl Streep, with the most actor ever with 21 nominations. I think that's a fair place to put her in this. So I think John Williams and Meryl Streep are locked in. I also kind of like the Johnny Cedric Gibbons pick of the 11 Oscars for production design, as well as designing the Oscar statuette itself.
I like that too. I would like to get either Roger Deakins or Thelma Schumacher in there to represent those categories, either the cinematography or the editing. I think those are really important categories to represent on a career list, and both of them have really, really long careers.
If I were to make my pick, it would be the Thelma Schumacher. It would be my vote of the two. I wish I could get Kenneth Branagh on the list, but I think only having mostly nominations and not wins is kind of what keeps him off. I just kind of wanted to bring that fact up that he's been nominated in more categories than anyone else, and people know that now that listen to this podcast. So
Yeah, it is really interesting, and I think that's definitely one that I think when you say that factoid, I think that puts him in contention for the list because that's such a interesting. He's one. I didn't realize he'd been nominated for shorts and that kind of thing. He's all over the place.
yeah.
So what do we got right now?
So
We
I
got
think
three?
we have locked in John Williams, Walt Disney, and Cedric Gibbons. Or not Walt Disney. Sorry, John Williams, Meryl Streep, and Cedric Gibbons are our locks.
All right. So should we throw in Schumacher on there?
Yeah, I think
And tie
Thelma
it up
Schumacher,
before?
because I think John Williams and Walt Disney are kind of the same picks of like, hey, look at these people with a bunch of nominations and wins. But I think John Williams is number one, having a composer is not something people would normally have, and so I'd want to represent that. And I feel like he's like known for that, like I don't know. If we're just putting on someone because they have a bunch of nominations and a bunch of wins, I feel like John Williams is who you would think of first when you think of the Oscars rather than Walt Disney. So I would rather have him. I think that kind of knocks Walt Disney off of maybe the overall list, even though they were both on my list. And so, yeah, John Williams. So I think, without further ado, our final list of Mount Rushmore for Lifetime Achievement. We have John Williams, Cedric Gibbons, Thelma Schumacher, and Meryl Streep.
It's a good list. I knew we'd get Streep on there somewhere. You know, when I saw her not on the actress list, I was like, oh no, Meryl Streep's not making the cut of the Oscar Rushmore. But
I think
as she does, she snuck her way back in. You know.
I think part of the problem with why Meryl Streep didn't get so much on the actress list is her career was kind of split between Best Actress and Best Supporting Actress, where I feel like if we had done a Best Supporting Actress category, she would have made that list. So
Yeah, because when I think of her, I mostly think of her supporting actress when she show up in like a small
Yeah.
supporting role and everyone and just get a nomination regardless of the movie. You know?
yeah. All right, so
She
I
was
think,
nominated for Into the Woods. You know,
yeah.
of all what the.
So
So I feel like I'm glad she made the list somewhere.
So I think that wraps up our show for today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We now are a video option on Spotify. So if you've been listening to us on Spotify or watching us on YouTube, you can now watch us on Spotify. So that's a little fun information. I figured that out last week when I downloaded I transferred the video file to an audio file, did a bunch of work, and then I went to upload the audio podcast, and they're like, you are now able to upload videos for your podcast. I'm like, God damn it, I just wasted a bunch of time. But now, from now on, I will just be uploading the video file straight to our podcast platform, so you will be able to watch us on Spotify.
See all our pretty faces as we debate movies.
Yep. All right, and I think that wraps up our show for today, and without further ado, goodbye. Hey, thank you for watching the Movie Change Up podcast. We'd really appreciate if you liked, commented, subscribed, and shared us with anyone you think might be into what we're doing over here. Thank you. Have a nice day.